Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to round 14 coverage of the Zurich 1953 Candidates Tournament. For this round, I've selected the game Averbakh versus Kotov. This round was interesting in a way. There were a lot of short draws. Smyslov got off with only 14 moves, and there was one other game that lasted about as long. Mrszewski also drew a somewhat longer game. And I was sort of wondering if there was any interesting chess going on in this round at all. There was a kind of a scrappy game between Hervé and Stahlberg, which a lot of mistakes through the middle part of the game, but an interesting rook endgame to look at if you like checking out the rook endgames. But then I came across this game, Averbakh-Kotov. This game won the Brilliancy Prize for the whole tournament, and Bronstein himself said that it was the best game in the tournament, in his opinion. And it's hard to argue with that. After playing through the game, I think it's one of the most beautiful games I've ever seen. So I'm really pleased to be able to bring this to you. This game has been anthologized, so it is fairly well known, although I wasn't familiar with it. It was collected in the book The World's Greatest Chess Games by John Nunn and others. Also, the central tactic of this has been featured in a number of books, including Winning Chess Tactics by Yasser Seirawan features the tactic from this game. And also King's Crusher did a video a few years ago featuring the central tactic from this game. So fairly well known, but a bit of a surprise to me anyhow. I think other games from the tournament since have become more famous, perhaps because they're more relevant to opening theory. This was played in the Old Indian, an opening which is not as popular as the King's Indian. So some of those King's Indian games have become classics and are more widely known today. Just a little bit about the players. Averbakh, with the white pieces, is still alive today. One of the players from the tournament who's still around, one of the two players from the tournament who's still alive today. And as I'm making the video, he's 92 years old, the oldest living grandmaster. He's a Russian chess player, grandmaster, author, and coach. And his opponent, Kotov, also a Russian coach and author, famous for the books Think Like a Grandmaster, etc. So let's just get into the game. D4 was the opening move from Averbakh. And Kotov plays knight f6. Now, Kotov in an earlier round had played with the white pieces against someone who tried out the Old Indian defense against him. Maybe it was Petrosian, I'm not sure. And so he was sort of intrigued by it, and so he was trying out the Old Indian defense. It's not part of his normal repertoire. So we'll show you the Old Indian. It has a lot of resemblances to a King's Indian, and you can think of some of the same tactical ideas and themes. So white's just very logically developing his pieces, and e5 is the idea. So this knight comes to d7 to support the e5 push, and white builds up a complete center here with e4, and now bishop e7. And this is the main difference between the Old Indian and the King's Indian. With the King's Indian, the pawn would be on g6 and the bishop would be on g7. So not a bad way to play. It's just never gotten the same kind of popularity as the King's Indian. It's also one of those positions where the chess engine is not impressed. Also in the King's Indian, the chess engine in most King's Indian openings gives the advantage to white, and we see the same thing here with the Old Indian. So the chess engines like the space advantage that white has, and they're not afraid of the tactical counter chances that black has. But the black player in these openings is playing for the tactics and the counterattack. A lot of times the center will lock up and then he'll attack on one wing or the other, and we'll see a similar kind of strategy here. We've been playing the main moves from amongst the top two choices in the opening database. So this is a very common setup in this line. Right here, rook e8, rook d1. There are a number of choices here. Instead of this queen c2, rook d1 plan, there was also the idea of bishop to e3, or just pushing on with d5, or starting on some knight maneuver, perhaps. No, I think those are the main choices. Anyway, queen c2, rook e8, rook d1. And now bishop f8 is a bit of a rare move here. I think queen c7 is the main move. And now rook b1. So white's intending to expand on the queen side in this position. He's going to keep the center a bit fluid and wait and see what happens. And black responds with a5. And now this puts a little wrinkle in white's plans. If white were to play, for example, a3, intending to play b4, black can just take this pawn in the center and after the exchange push this pawn to a4, push the a5 pawn to a4, and just have a clamp on the queen side here and prevent any future ideas. So Averbakh strikes first on the center with d5 and just prevents that exchange. Now the knight goes to c5, putting a little pressure on the e-pawn, and bishop to e3, so continuing to develop. And he's still not so eager to play the move a3 because of the move a5, putting a clamp on it. Although with this this knight here is a target, maybe there's some possibilities. Anyway, queen c7 was played at this point. h3, kind of a waiting move. Bishop to d7. So it also kept the bishop from coming to the g4 square. And rook b to c1. So white has changed his mind at this point. At first he was planning to expand on the queen side, and he had the rook on b1 prepared to support that b4 advance. And he's decided that that's not going to pay off. And the combination of this pawn here, the knight here, it appears like there's no good way for him to get in the move b4. Black plays the move g6 here, and now it looks like the bishop could be rerouted to g7, and we would have something very like a King's Indian defense. Knight to d2, preparing to respond on the king side if this knight gets out of the way, and black follows the usual plan of pushing the f-pawn. He's getting his knight out of the way of the f-pawn so he can respond. And it also adds another defender to the e-pawn, which is coming under some pressure. So rook a to b8. Black is saying, well, I could expand on the king side too. So they're both playing this shifty kind of game where they're not revealing entirely their intentions of which side they're going to play on. Knight to b3. So an interesting move, just exchanging off this pretty strong knight here on c5. So Kotov takes, and white takes with the queen. The queen might be useful over here, and maybe he just didn't want to double his pawn, so taking with the queen. But it does seem like the queen's been drawn away from the king side where the action might be. c5. So this, at last, is a real declaration of intention. The center was kept fluid up to this point, but now it's locked. And so now it's clear that the action is going to take place on the wings. And also because he's played this move c6 to c5, he's given up any hope of ever pushing this b-pawn forward. And so it's pretty much a declaration, as Bronstein wrote in his commentary on this game, that black is going to play for a kingside attack. So Averbakh prepares for the attack by getting his king out of the way. Off the back rank, black moves his king to the h-file as well. They're both thinking about operations on the g-file. Queen to c2, getting the queen back, ready for operations on the king side. Knight to g8, getting out of the way of the typical f-pawn push that you might see in a King's Indian. And now bishop to g4 here. Bishop to g4. Yeah, sorry, I was moving the wrong bishop. So there were other alternatives here. Maybe it's slightly more accurate to play queen d2, but this is a fine move. Exchanging off the light squared bishop, which is often a dangerous attacking piece in this formation. Black declines to trade right away, but goes in for this move, knight to h6. The chess engine prefers the move bishop to h6, by the way, trying to exchange off this dark squared bishop, which is a really strong piece for white in this formation. So that's an idea for black. But knight to h6, keeps the game going. And now white decides to trade off this light squared bishop, which is, as I mentioned, the good bishop. And also, as long as this white bishop is around, there's always ideas of a sacrifice here on h3. Okay, so queen d2 was played now, bringing the queen over, putting pressure on the knight. The knight goes back to g8. So, and now Averbakh plays g4. So Bronstein was somewhat critical of Averbach's play at this point. He said, it's clear that there's going to be this king-side attack, and Averbach's approach of throwing the pawns forward here is the equivalent of throwing gasoline on a fire. But the chess engine does not agree, and I have to say, this seems like a pretty logical way. Why should white be any worse on the king side? He's got all these pieces that are ready to come over to the king side. The knight's a bit far away, but the queen, the bishop, the two rooks are all set up to come over to the king side. It's not clear if a line opens up over here who it's really going to favor. So anyway, Kotov is not going to let this duo of pawns here go unchallenged, and he immediately kicks back with f5. And now, instead of exchanging right away, Averbakh decides to shore up his position a bit with the move f3. The chess engine actually likes taking. It thinks, I'll go ahead and put this on. It thinks that in this position, g takes f5, g takes f5, e takes f5, queen takes f5, and getting rid of two pawns over there, and then rook to g1. Rook to g1, yeah, and bishop to e7. Trying to maneuver the bishop around to get in a position to attack things over here, and queen to e2, getting onto a light square and covering some squares over here. It thinks white is better in this position. It's hard for me to say. I just have to take the chess engine's opinion. Bronstein was of the opinion it was really dangerous to open things up like this, so he did not really think that was a great idea. Okay, so Averbakh played f3. We'll get an opening in a little bit. Bishop to e7 is played first. Rook to g1. So some of the same moves just played before the pawns are exchanged. Rook to f8. And rook C to f1. So we've got both the rooks over here on the king side. We've got the queen and the bishop over here. And we just need to bring the knight in. And all of our pieces are going to be operating on the king side here. And of course, black is in a similar situation. All of his pieces are pretty much ready to jump in the action, although the knight's still a couple of hops away from really being able to inflict damage. Black played the move rook f7, preparing to double on the f-file. And right here, Averbakh played the move g takes f5. So he decided this was the right time to open things up. And the chess engine likes this decision. It actually prefers e takes f5 slightly, but it thinks this is a good move too. G takes f5, g takes f5, and now rook to g2, preparing to double on the g file. So this is the first point where the chess engine changes its mind a bit. Right here, it thinks once again that white should continue taking. E takes, queen takes, and rook to g3, just defending along the third rank against various threats. And thinks white is better here. He's got opportunities to double on the g file. He's got everything pretty securely protected, and the knight can jump into the game. Maybe the knight can even get to this square. Get to the square e4 there. It would be a pretty interesting spot for the knight. Although you have to be careful about the idea of sacrifices there, because there is a loose rook here. So anyway, a good position for white according to the chess engine, although definitely going to be difficult to play for both sides because of all the threats with the open lines and the exposed king. So a dangerous game is in store. Instead of continuing to exchange, he exchanged one pair of pawns, and then he lifted his rook to g2. And now the engine rates this position as about even, instead of being favorable for white. So black pushes on with f4. You see this idea also in a lot of King's Indian games. Black is just taking squares away from white pieces. He's kicking the bishop, and he's just trying to create a situation where it's difficult for white to maneuver his pieces. And that's the advantage that black has in a lot of these King's Indian positions, is that he just has the more space on the king side. White can have enough pieces to defend in theory or in principle, but he can have difficulty maneuvering them, and black can take advantage of it. And at this point, the chess engine is starting to change its tune a little bit. After rook f6, it now thinks that black is a little bit better. And then one more mistake from Kotov, or from Averbakh, is this move knight e2. So, well, he needs to get his knight into the game, so it's a logical move. But this move allows a tactic. And so this is the very position that's featured on a lot of tactics books. So why don't you, it's black's turn to move, and if you want to think about this one for a while, see if you can spot the tactic in this position that black has. Now black is generally better here, just because white's pieces are so clogged up. So there's a lot of decent moves for black, but there's only one really amazing tactic. So look for that, and if you find the tactic, see if you can calculate the continuation. See how deep you can calculate it. Okay, pause the video if you want some time to think about it. I'm going to give the answer away right here. It's this amazing move. Queen takes h3. Check. Okay. Well, first of all, what are you going to do about this check? If the king runs away, you say, well, maybe it's okay, I just run away, and I'll just run away, and I've just lost a pawn, but the game goes on. But then there's a simple move, rook h6, threatening checkmate here, and the king's escape is blocked by his own pieces. This is what I was talking about. These moves by black have taken away squares from all of white's pieces, and there's no good place to put them. If you were to move the bishop out of the way to give him an escape square, the only square the bishop has, it'll get taken on all these other squares, right? So the only square the bishop can go to is back to e1. Queen to h1 check anyway. King to f2. And now bishop to h4 check is devastating. The king can't run away. This pawn that got pushed to f4 is controlling his escape square. His other escape squares are blocked in by his own pieces, so he's got to start sacrificing material here. So that would be just losing. And any other moves by the bishop, you just lose the bishop and the attack continues. So that's hopeless, to just retreat. The only move that white has to continue the game is to take the queen. And now let's stop and take a look at this situation. Black has sacrificed a queen for just a pawn. If you look at the material, there's 2 rooks, 2 pieces, and a queen versus 2 rooks and 2 pieces. So black is an entire queen down, or white is an entire queen up, and yet he's winning. So there's only one move here which continues the win for black. And why don't you take a second, even if you missed the initial idea, let's see if you can find the one move for black that continues the win. Okay, I'm giving the answer away now. It's rook h6 check. So this is the idea. You had to see the queen sacrifice and the rook move. And there's only one move for the king, really. If the king goes to... there's 2 legal moves. If the bishop goes here, just to show you, then rook takes is checkmate. So that's not a good idea. But notice this checkmate. The rook is covering all of these squares, the pawn is covering that square, and the rook is covering that square. It's defended by the bishop. So the king has been drawn forward by the queen sacrifice, and it's just getting mated there. So the king has to move, and the only square he can move to is forward. King goes to g4. So that's the idea. The queen sacrificed the rook check, and now the king is completely isolated and at the mercy of all these pieces, and all of white's pieces are piled up behind it. So anyway, just an amazing picture. And now, once again, there is one move that oh, I can't say that. There's a couple moves that continue the win here, so I won't make a quiz of it. Knight to f6 is the next move here, and there's only one move for the king again. And if the king goes back to, or if the king goes forward to g5, then there is a mate in 1. Another beautiful checkmate. The rook here, defended by the knight, takes away all of these squares. This square is taken away by the rook, and this square is taken away by the pawn. I mean, this square is taken away by the knight, and this square is taken away by the pawn. So just a lovely checkmate with the knight, the rook, and his pawns here, of course, are contributing, and the pawn there. So the king only has one square to avoid checkmate. It goes to f5. And now knight d7 was played here. What's the situation at the board? It's move 33, and there is an adjournment at move 40. So Kotov here plays a series of moves which keep the king trapped. He never lets it out of the box. And then makes it to the adjournment, and then he figures out a way to finish him off overnight. He has time to look at the position and figure out the best way to finish the game. But right here, if he had had the time to think about it, he might have found the move knight g4. This was found later by Najdorf in analysis after the tournament. I'll go ahead and put this on the board. This is the line Najdorf came up with. Knight to g4, sacrificing another piece. So if the king takes the knight, then it's a mate in 2 with rook to g8, check. King has to go back, and a couple mates here. Rook to f6 is the simplest mate there. So can't take the knight that way. He could try taking with the pawn, and after that, rook to f8 is checkmate. This king is under fire here. The rook is guarding all of those escape squares, and the bishop is guarding that escape square. And the two pawns keep the king trapped. So after knight g4, both ways of taking the knight fail. And the line given by Najdorf is knight takes f4. Of course, white is a whole queen up, right? So he can afford to give a lot of material back to save the king. But this doesn't work because of the move rook to g8, threatening, once again threatening knight here, rook to f6, checkmate. Knight to h5 would be played, trying to cover that square. And now rook h to g6. Cancel that. Rook h to g6. Yeah, let's get the right rook there. And just renewing this checkmate threat of rook over here and checkmating. Queen to g5 to cover this square is the only way to avoid the checkmate. And then bishop takes queen, and king takes g4. Finally, he can grab the knight without getting mated, and bishop to f4 check. King goes to h3, and rook takes g2. And finally, well, after knight takes f4, pawn takes f4, we finally reach this simplified situation where black is the exchange up, and he has an outside passed pawn, and it's an easy endgame win. So that would have been the quickest way to terminate the game. And that would have been a line, if you were to completely calculate out, we're now on move 40, and the queen sacrifice was on move 30. So you would have had to calculate 10 moves ahead to see this position to find the fastest win. Pretty amazing. Okay, let's back up to the game. Instead of this pretty incredible knight g4 move, what Kotov did was played a few waiting moves here. He played knight d7, and now the king is being threatened with checkmate here. Let's see, what's the simplest checkmate here? Let's see. Well, let's give a waiting move for white, just so I can illustrate the checkmate threat. The checkmate threat is rook to f8 check. Yeah, that's what I wanted to show. The king has to go to the h file, or the g file, Let's see, where is it legal for him to go? It's only legal squares there. Then this rook comes to g8, forcing him back, and then this rook comes to f6. So that's the checkmate threat at this point. If white does nothing, it's check here, driving the king back here, and then this rook comes over to deliver the mate. So rook g5 is pretty much forced. What this does is it provides an escape square for the king. But Kotov had allowed for this. He plays rook f8 check, and the king goes to g4, and now he plays knight f6 check, and the king comes back, because you'll see, look at the pawn. The pawn on f4 once again is cutting off the king's escape. He has nowhere to run to. He has to come back after the knight check. So Kotov had seen this, and he figured he could waste a few moves, moving his knight around. He has to be careful to avoid a threefold repetition. So finally, instead of going back to g8, he went to this square and grabbed a pawn. But he's not doing this as a windmill type tactic to win material. He's just doing this to kill some time and get up past the 40 move. Knight, now he goes back to g8. King goes to g4. Knight f6 check. So it's a different position, so he was able to repeat that move after this pawn is gone without getting into a threefold repetition. It has to be an exact position on the board is repeated 3 times, and after the pawn is gone, he can go back and repeat the knight moves without falling afoul of the threefold repetition rule. King to f5, knight to g8 check, king to g4, and finally, we're on move 43 here, finally he continues the rest of the combination. He plays bishop takes g5, grabbing the rook, which has been sitting there ready to take all the time. The king has no moves other than taking the bishop, and if he doesn't take the bishop, once again, that's if we do a nothing move like this. There's a mate in 6 here, starting with knight f6. So, well, he might as well take that bishop. I guess I'm not going to show every possible mate in 6 here. So he takes the bishop, and then rook to f7 is played with another one of these threats. Rook here check, rook here checkmate. So has to do something about that. Bishop to h4. And now rook to g6 check. Forces the king to the h-file, and rook f to g7. So just threatening checkmate on h6 there, with the rook and the 2 rooks lined up, checkmating the king. The king, notice, has gotten in front of all his pieces once again. Bishop to g5 was played, trying to stop this. So he takes the bishop. And now the king has an escape square. It goes to h4. And now knight to f6. So the rooks are supporting each other, so the knight's no longer needed. And the knight is controlling this square on h5, which becomes very important. So knight to g3, sacrificing another piece, but trying to stop this rook from coming over here with checkmate. So rook takes g3. Queen takes d6. The last piece thrown on the fire. Cancel that. Cancel that. Queen takes d6. Ah, right here. Okay, he's not giving up his queen yet. He's holding on to the queen, trying to get some counterplay. Maybe he can give some checks on the back rank. And now this rook on g3 moves back to g6. White throws in the move queen b8 check. The rook goes back to g8. And here White resigned finally. This is how the game ended. The threat is very simple. It's just rook to h6 is checkmate with the 2 rooks. The king can't come forward to stop that rook from getting to h6 because the knight is controlling that square on h5. So the king is stuck over here. No piece can get in front, so that mate is pretty inevitable. The only way to stop the mate at this point is to sacrifice the queen. And after queen takes, either king takes or rook takes, actually. The engine suggests king takes is most accurate. Black is a piece up with an outside pass pawn, and it's clearly winning. So in this position, Averbakh resigned. And yeah, just a lovely game, and not so horribly complicated. What was hard was, I mean, of course, the tactics were incredible, but the strategic structure of the game I thought was pretty clear, which helped make it kind of a lovely game, in my opinion. You know, everything is going along smoothly. We see both sides building up on the king's side, and then suddenly there's this incredible breakthrough. And the king is completely isolated and cut off from the rest of his pieces, and black's minor pieces, even though he's down a whole queen, his minor pieces swarm all over the king as rooks and minor pieces, and eventually white's forced to sacrifice all the material back and more, and black wins. So hope you guys enjoyed that one. As far as the standings went, there was no change at the top of the leaderboard. Because of all of the draws. So Smyslov still leads the tournament after 14 rounds with 9 points. We have Reshevsky in second place with 8 points, and a tie for third between Bronstein and Nydorf with 7.5 points each. So round 15 is coming up. Stay tuned for that. We'll see you again soon. Bye.